Hi everybody, welcome to 8th grade biology. We're going to be starting with chapter 3 section 1 entitled What is Ecology? We've broken this section down into two separate videos, which means you have two separate sets of notes. Part 2 follows right up with part 1. You'll see this slide again at the end. These are the key terms and key concepts for this unit. Now let's get started with the notes themselves. In order to study ecology, we need to understand what interactions are and what the term interdependence is. Ecology is the scientific study of interactions among different organisms and between organisms and their environment or their surroundings. So ecology is studying how two things relate to each other or how things relate to their environment. The environment which we're talking about is the biosphere. The biosphere is the combined portion of the planet where all life exists. Land, water, and the air, or a scientific term, the atmosphere. The biosphere itself is a pretty big space. It goes from about 8 kilometers above the surface of the Earth to about 11 kilometers below the surface of the Earth. So in that roughly 20 kilometer area, you have a lot of living things surviving. Now, the interactions within the biosphere between different organisms produces a web of interdependence between organisms and the environment in which they live. The interdependency of life on Earth contributes to a very dynamic and changing biosphere. You guys have seen this before when you've talked about food chains and food webs. Now, before we can talk about food chains and food webs, which come in later, we need to talk about the levels of organization in the biosphere. Now, the relationship of things in the biosphere, we have to answer some questions. We have to answer questions about events and organisms that range in complexity from one single thing to the entire biosphere. Because remember, we're talking about the interaction between organisms and between organisms in the biosphere. And then we have here the list of levels, which we're going to break down on each of the further slides. The first level of organization is the species or individual. A species is a group of organisms so similar to one another that they can breed and produce fertile offspring. So you have a population of deer. They're closely related enough to one another they can reproduce fertile offspring. Then you have a population. A population is a group of individuals that belong to the same species and live in the same area. So in a field north of Portland, we have a population of deer. In a field west of Portland, we have a separate population of deer. They're the same species and they're in their unique areas. The next level up is community. And in a community, you just have an assemblage or a group of different populations that are in a defined area. So you have the deer north of Portland, and you have the foxes north of Portland, and the rabbits north of Portland. That makes a community because they're different populations in an area. Moving further out our levels of organization, we have an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a collection of organisms that live in a particular area and the environment in which they live. So you have the community and the fields and streams and rivers and hills and roads that they live in and around. Next is biome. A biome is a group of ecosystems. You see how we're building from small to bigger and bigger. A biome is a group of ecosystems that have the same climate and similar dominant communities. So the dominant species is similar across the board. And then finally, our highest level of organization is the biosphere. On this diagram, which you have in your notes, you're going to want to label this from species or individual out through biosphere. And you'll see this diagram on lots of things that we cover. And I told you guys would see the list of vocabulary terms again. The list of vocabulary terms for this section are ecology, biosphere, species, population, community, ecosystem, and biome. Knowing those terms will give you a good start on this section. And being able to answer the key concepts, the different levels of organization, ecologist study, which we just went through and you did a diagram on, and then the methods of studying ecology, which is something we're going to be studying in the next video. All right, good luck, study hard.